Number 10. Avro 716 Shackleton MR3. An Avro 716 Shackleton MR3 aircraft was en route from South Africa to the UK in 1994 when both of its engines failed. The pilot was forced to crash land on the floor of the Western Sahara Desert in the middle of the night. Luckily, all 19 people aboard survived. The plane was on its way to an air show when it instead came to rest at the remote crash site where it still remains to this day. After realizing that the engines had failed, the pilot spent 10 minutes trying to do what he could to fix the problem before realizing that he had no other choice but to attempt an emergency landing. When all was said and done, the plane was damaged beyond repair, and so it was simply left in place. The Avro Shackleton was a British-made maritime patrol aircraft that was also used by the South African Air Force. It was developed during the late 1940s as the British military's way of responding to the Soviet Union's rapid expansion of its navy. The aircraft that crashed in the desert was built in 1957 and belonged to the South African military. By then, most Avro Shackletons had been taken out of service in favor of newer planes. The survivors were much luckier than some others who had experienced crashes in the aircraft, many of whom did not live to tell their story. Number 9. Catalina seaplane. A team from Esquire magazine was in the Saudi Arabian desert last year in the country's northwestern region when they came across a decaying World War II-era Catalina seaplane. They researched its origins and learned that during the 1950s, Thomas Kindle, a wealthy retired American businessman, decided to fly his family around the world. He bought 3 amphibious Catalina seaplanes that were built in the 1930s and renovated them into luxury flying homes. He then set off on his global journey with his wife, kids, and some friends. The trip became famous as photographs from the group's travels were published in Life magazine. But things took a disappointing turn on March 22, 1960, when they decided to land in Saudi Arabia without permission. The planes touched down along a beach where the travelers spent the night. They thought locals would see their American flag and perceive them as friendly, but they learned otherwise when some men with guns showed up and began shooting at one of their planes. Over the course of a half hour, an estimated 300 rounds were fired at the aircraft, rendering it unflyable. Luckily, nobody was injured in the chaos. The Kindles were taken to Jeddah and then went back to the US, leaving behind the destroyed plane that still sits in the desert to this day. Number 8. Tareem mummies. Located along the historic Silk Trade Route in northwestern China, the Tareem Basin is known for both its past and present biological and cultural diversity. For thousands of years, people from a vast array of places passed through the area. So when hundreds of ancient mummified corpses were found there, scientists were left stumped about their origins. The Tareem mummies date as far back as 4,000 years, with the most recent remains dating back to around 200 AD. They seem out of place given their Western appearances, wool and felt clothing, and unusual array of grave goods, which include cheese, wheat, and millet. Based on the evidence, experts speculated that they may have been long-distance herders or migrating farmers, but new findings are suggesting otherwise. Last year, researchers performed DNA tests on 20 of the mummies in hopes of getting to the bottom of the mystery surrounding their identity. Contrary to the general consensus among scholars that the society probably came to the area from elsewhere, the results indicate that they were a highly genetically isolated local population who descended from an ancient Ice Age Asian population. Study author Christina Warner told CNN that the group openly embraced new ideas and technologies from other societies, leading to the formation of the extremely unique culture reflected in their fashion and burial customs. The population that the mummies descended from, known as ancient North Eurasians, were widespread during the last Ice Age, but had largely disappeared by around 10,000 years ago. Only small traces of their DNA have persisted into some modern populations, including some indigenous groups in North America and Siberia. Interestingly, the people that the Tareem mummies came from intermingled with numerous Bronze Age populations before becoming genetically isolated. While the findings are promising, there are still questions surrounding the origins of the Tareem people. Scientists only sampled DNA from mummies at one site, and it's possible that they could discover other genetic connections as they expand on their research. Number 7. Prehistoric whales. 36 million years ago, the now barren landscape of Peru's Ocucaje Desert was covered by a shallow sea. Consequently, scientists have found a plethora of marine fossils in the region. Last year, a team uncovered the skeleton of a massive prehistoric whale that sat at or near the top of its food chain. Nicknamed the Ocucaje predator, the remains were identified as the Basilosaurus. The archaic whales evolved from land creatures around 55 million years ago. Sometime between then and 34 million years ago, they fully adapted to life in the water. They recently discovered specimen measured around 55 feet long and had huge razor-sharp teeth that it used for feeding on tuna, sharks, and sardines. It was one of the world's largest predators at the time. The discovery came just a handful of years after a strange four-legged whale ancestor was found in the same region. Measuring roughly 13 feet long, the otter-like creature lived around 43 million years ago and had tiny little hooves on its fingertips, indicating that it could both swim and walk on land. Scientists believe that these early cetaceans descended from a hooved ancestor that made its way over to South America from Asia. Discoveries like these are helping experts trace the history of whale evolution and migration and the incredible ways these creatures adapted to survive in their changing environments. Number 6. A lost alligator. Deputies from the Midland County Sheriff's Office in West Texas were shocked recently when they received a call about an alligator roaming around a trailer park. Much to their surprise, they arrived at the scene and found that the tipster was telling the truth. The creature was far from the swampy, humid freshwater habitats the species is normally found in and had somehow made its way into the middle of the desert. Law enforcement has no idea how it got there, but has speculated that perhaps it was someone's escaped pet. They safely captured the reptile and took it to a veterinarian for care until it could be turned over to a game warden. In the meantime, they said that they were hoping someone would come forward with an explanation for the out-of-place gator. What would you do if you found an animal near your home that you knew for sure did not belong there? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. Space rock. While conducting field work in the Egyptian Sahara back in 1996, archaeologist Ali A. Baccarat discovered an unusually shiny black pebble. The region has long been famous for its unique Libyan desert glass, which scientists think was produced during an extreme surface heating event such as a meteorite impact. But researchers only recently announced that they think they've determined the origins of the shiny black pebble, known as Hypatia. At first, experts surmised that the stone could have come from the same meteorite impact that created Libyan desert glass, but the Hypatia stone is unlike anything in our solar system or galaxy. A 2013 paper suggested that it was a comet fragment, but there were a number of issues with this theory, including the fact that most comet fragments on Earth are found in the form of microscopic dust. A 2015 study ruled out both the meteorite and comet theories, but it still left a big fat question mark on how, when, and where the Hypatia stone was formed. The team continued to investigate and identified a sizable amount of interstellar dust in the rock. From there, they narrowed their most likely candidate down to an extremely rare event, known as a Type 1a supernova, which happens just once or twice every century within a galaxy. Type 1a supernovae are thought to be the source of most of the iron in the universe and are among the brightest events known to happen. They occur when a dying red star and a white dwarf become entangled in a binary system within a cloud of dust called a nebula. Eventually, the white dwarf eats the red giant and a massive explosion ensues. Scientists speculate that the Hypatia's parent rock formed after the cooling process and eventually descended toward Earth at a time when our solar system was in its formative stages. Pressure and heat from its entry into the atmosphere and its crash into the desert floor most likely caused the parent rock to shatter, leaving behind the small particle that was found billions of years later. Number 4. Strange dinosaur. Since the early 20th century, numerous dinosaur fossils have been found in a rock formation at the Baharia oasis in the Egyptian Sahara Desert. Scientists recently announced the discovery of a specimen from a group of dinosaurs known as abelisaurids. While the abelisaur fossil has been found in various other parts of the world, the yet unnamed species represents the first dinosaur of its kind from the Baharia formation. It was identified as a new type of abelisaurid based on a vertebrae that was unearthed in 2016. A recent study describes the creature as having a bulldog-like face with small teeth and stumpy arms and measuring an estimated 20 feet from head to tail. It roamed the Earth around 98 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, when abelisaurids represented one of the most diverse and widespread groups of dinosaurs that existed at the time. And while the new species is the first known abelisaurid to be discovered at the site, there was certainly no shortage of large predatory dinosaurs in the region. Lead study author Bilal Salem told Phys.org that Baharia Oasis would have been one of the most terrifying places on the planet during the mid-Cretaceous. He went on to say that it's a mystery how so many ferocious giant reptiles coexisted in one place, but that they probably had adapted to hunt different prey. Number 3. Chinchorro mummies. Around 7000 BC, a prehistoric hunter-gatherer society known as the Chinchorro culture emerged along the coast of what is now Chile's Atacama Desert. They were the earliest known group to preserve their dead, developing their techniques roughly 2,000 years before the Egyptians came up with their own way of doing it. At first, only babies and fetuses were mummified, perhaps due to the high infant mortality rate at the time. The practice eventually spread to adult remains. Over a 4,000-year span, the Chinchorro culture developed 5 main preservation techniques, resulting in different kinds of mummies. The 2 most common types of mummies are known as black and red mummies. Black mummies were created by taking a deceased person's body apart and reassembling it, while red mummies were prepared by removing the internal organs through small incisions and letting the body dry out. Corpses were stuffed with twigs and reeds and wore wigs and clay masks. The Chinchorro mummies were discovered over a century ago, yet most people haven't even heard of them. Last year, the culture settlements in Chile's Arica and Parinacota region were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Experts are hoping this newfound status will help them raise the necessary funds for preserving the mummies, which are increasingly threatened by climate change. Number 2. Bee diversity. Scientists have long known that the San Bernardino Valley is home to a rich variety of bees, but even they were surprised to learn that there are nearly 500 species living in the region. Situated in the Chihuahuan Desert, the valley straddles the U.S.-Mexico border between Arizona and Sonora. Thanks to annual monsoons, it's an oasis filled with abundant plant life that attracts the bees from near and far. In recent years, San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge manager Bill Radke and entomologist Bob Minkley identified 497 species within a 6-square-mile area. In addition to the shocking diversity which has earned the area the distinction of having the world's largest concentration of bee species, the pair were blown away by the sheer density of the bees. To put things in perspective, there are more bees in this tiny section of the San Bernardino Valley, which is 10 times smaller than Washington, D.C., than there are in the entire state of New York. Radke and Minkley found just one specimen of some species, indicating that the area is frequented by some very rare bees. They collected some bees that only feed on one plant, including the chimney bee, which pollinates the prickly pear cactus. The species range in size from the 3mm Perdita minima to some that are more than an inch long. Number 1. Neolithic Shrine. While digging in the eastern desert of Jordan last year, archaeologists discovered a 9,000-year-old Neolithic shrine and hunting ground. Located among the country's Kashabia Mountains, the site consists of large structures known as desert kites, which were used for trapping gazelles and other animals, along with 2 carved standing stones featuring anthropomorphic figures. The team also found an altar, a hearth, a miniature model of a desert kite, and some marine shells. Excavation co-director Wael Abu Aziza told the Associated Press that the site is remarkably intact despite its age. In a statement, he and his colleagues said that the discovery is helping to shed light on the artistic expression and spiritual beliefs of the region's mysterious Neolithic population. Based on how close the site was to the hunting traps, the team believes that it may have been inhabited by specialized hunters, and that the kites might have played a central role in the occupants' spiritual, economic, and symbolic lives. Thanks for watching. Have you ever found something strange in a desert? Tell us about it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.